today, see, all these social networks keep us occupied. And you see, you really love Jesus, but did you forget that for us, he died? You see, you spend more time on Twitter than you do with your hashtag sister who's upset over her hashtag mister because he hashtag hits her. Hashtag TGIF. Hashtag party. You say there's hope left, but hashtag hardly. You see, you sit around making tweets about what's happening in the streets like there wasn't poverty or AIDS, like Lucifer isn't trying to take over this day and age. You talk about how Christian you are, but your Christianity doesn't radiate from the heart. And you say, my friends don't go to church and it's just because they're tired, but it is like man has forgotten his morals. Like we're all totally rewired. You rebuttal with, oh, but they believe in God, half-heartedly wishing, well, even demons believe in God, but it doesn't mean they're a Christian. And while you sit there pleasuring yourself with masturbation, there are kids in South Africa dealing with annihilation, and with God they have no relation, and no help comes from this nation, because we are all just abrasions in the foot of society's special occasions. You talk to your friends and say, I'm so hashtag blessed, but then you get out in public and you couldn't show it any hashtag less. You don't do your hashtag best because you couldn't hashtag care less. You talk to your friends about this hot girl you want to have sex with and say, it's funny because I'm still a virgin, when really you should be saying, it's funny because I'm supposed to be a Christian. You see, for you and me to believe what we believe, the King of Kings had to be stretched out across the hashtag tree, and with that, anyone else's spirits would have been diminished, but not his, because it was not finished. And one day you see this kid get shoved into a hashtag wall, but you walk by, let nothing happen, because it's not your problem at all. And you don't see them again, nowhere in the halls, and they decided to take their own life because they couldn't hashtag deal with it all. And you could have prevented it because all they needed was a friend, but your social acceptance was much more important because you needed to hashtag fit in. You wouldn't hashtag been for the soul of someone else who was at their hashtag wits end. You see, tragedy is struck and it hits you in the heart, but there is still something about social acceptance that couldn't make you hashtag part. You say, Lord, I'll take my cross and hashtag follow, but you know that isn't true because you're hashtag hollow. And we've got to abandon all these things we've thought to be hashtag true and stop altering the scripture to find a better fit for you. You see, in the Bible we read, and specifically Romans 5:8, it talks about how Christ died for all sinners, which is something you don't hashtag appreciate. And you struggle with the thought that Christ would even really die for us, and it's because you're so hashtag selfish, but Christ, he is so completely different. He is so hashtag selfless. See, finally you pour your heart and soul and say, I want to be a hashtag witness, but it is not finished. You've got to learn something else. You've got to learn hashtag forgiveness, like the Lord did when his skin was hashtag ripped from him. You see, the Romans tortured him, and through it all, he cried, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And during those few words, he was praying for you. After they spit in his face and hit him with glass-covered whips, the words, it is finished, escaped from his lips.